So the barbed wire thong, actually quite comfortable and just brilliant for exfoliating. You're listening to the Beat Motel podcast, and we need to warn you that we like to use words like fuck, shit, and syndicalus, butty scrutux, angry flap, and foot biscuits. And we don't often bleep those words out, apart from because we're not complete animals. But if you understand that and you like music, then listen on. You're back with Beat Motel, and I can see Roland Rat on the screen. For anyone just this week, I'm joined by special guest Roland Rat. Dr. Sam is still abroad doing, I don't know, something or other. Something in Kazakhstan, maybe. It's just a guess, but there's a lot of countries in the world. So I'm joined for a record 4th time in a row by Mr. David Jago.
Bonjour.
How are you?
I'm all right.
Full of beans? Was I kind of come in a bit hot there?
Well, it feels like it's like when is it Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart have like an emergency podcast. So it feels like that. You got in touch with me yesterday. It was like, let's do one tomorrow morning. I was like, bloody hell.
Emergency podcast.
Yeah.
That's just a phrase that would have meant nothing very few number of years ago.
Yeah. Well, when like Trump gets shot or something, Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, like, quick, get on and do something. Talk
Quick
to the people.
podcast.
Yeah, emergency podcast.
Oh, like they say, if somebody listening to this in the future, the way you said that made it sound like it could happen more than once. You're like, oh, like when it happens, when that happens, the multiple times
happen. Yeah.
Right, we ought to move on from this. Before I move on, I want to acknowledge and thank everyone who's been interacting with us on TikTok. We had one video comparing Dave Mustaine to Alan Partridge, which I thought was one of the greatest moments of the last episode. And as that went down so well, the whole of this episode is going to be talking about how King Diamond from Merciful Fate is a real-life Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
It's not really, is it?
It might not get quite so many hits.
No, it's a bit more obscure. It's kind of like gone way more famous on the comparison with Mr. Bean, because he was huge in America. King Diamond might be a little bit more obscure.
Well, I think Mr. Bean was a worldwide phenomenon, wasn't it? Because it was silent. I think it was something you didn't have to translate it, particularly, did you? Those sorts of noises.
Whereas King Diamond, you do have to sort of translate black metal a little bit. I mean, even if you like black metal, which I do, you still sort of go, well, there's like the good black metal, and then there's the right wing black metal, and then there's the stuff that you can't understand, and then it's a complex world, David.
Who's the one that had the god deflecting armor? I think he might have been a sort of a black metal Nazi or something.
God deflecting arm.
He wore god deflecting armor. He was in, what band was it? I can't remember. It's one of those sorts of bands. I'm sure it was.
I am looking that up because that definitely sounds like the Humulus Norwegians to me.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Somebody will let us know, because all I'm finding is LARP things.
Well, maybe I dreamt it. It was a long time ago that I heard someone mention that.
It sounds entirely on brand. It sounds entirely plausible. But have you ever been interested in doing the LARP thing? You know about LARPing? You're looking quite blank there. Yeah. LARPing. Well, I went to high school. It's early. It is early. I went to high school in Framlingham, so every year the school trip was to the castle, and sometimes we'd go there in the evenings and drink cider and smoke consulate cigarettes and the usual teenage things. And sometimes you'd turn up and there'd be people dressed in homemade medieval sort of fantasy get-up with large cardboard swords.
Okay.
And they were indulging in LARPing, live action role play.
Okay. No, I don't think that's my thing. I think if there was one thing that I quite like. Do you ever see the medieval torture wood carvings? I've got a bit of a thing for them.
What, like a carving depicting it, or would like? Oh, right. So it's not like the torture device makes you do a wooden carving, because that sounds incredibly elaborate.
Yeah. No, it's just they just capture the image. People sawing.
Like, hold it there. Let me get my chisel.
I'm just doing this wood carving. Yeah.
Medieval equivalent of the Polaroid.
I quite like that. You know, I remember going to Traitor's Gate in the Tower of London as a child. I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. Once you go in, at Traitor's Gate, once you go in, you never come out. And I think I went to London. I was like about 8 or 9 or something. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. It just changed my life.
Absolutely, yeah. At a certain age, you're really like, I think it's, oh no, we're going to get into some kind of, it's because I know you're a psychoanalyst. I'm always quite interested in seeing kind of where it hasn't worn off.
No, I'm still fascinated. I still love it.
They could end up like trading cards. Like we had Garbage Pail Kids when we were, if you had like, do you think that's what happened in medieval times? They're like, oh, have you got number 47, the detesticalization of St. Patrick?
Yeah,
like, I'll trade you.
You can get top trumps of dictators. I remember seeing that. Yeah, because I looked online.
That's wild.
Because my brother-in-law gave me an actual stamp, like a Hitler stamp, like an actual Hitler stamp, and I've got it. And so I went online to have a look. They're not that much because he obviously got loads done, you know. And then I found dictators top trumps. You know, the amount of people you've killed. You know, this is amazing. Yeah,
that's so strange. We just used to play with like medium-sized family British, European saloon cars. I think was the one I had.
Yeah, sports cars,
unaspirational. My friends all had like supercars or like Formula One cars. I had, moderately affordable, unaspirational, beige Vauxhall Cavaliers.
Oh, the 70s cars were so good though.
Death traps, but good. But this is a music podcast. It might surprise anyone who's not heard this before. So we have a theme for this episode, which was originally a bit too big. Sometimes we come up with a theme for Beat Motel, and it's hard to actually find 4 tracks each. So the format is, if you've not listened to before, each of us get 4 tracks to act as discussion points around the theme. And the original theme was it best band biopics and documentaries, which at first glance I thought that's not going to be that easy. But then the more I thought about it, I thought there's a lot.
Once you start looking through the lists, there's a lot of stuff, yeah.
So we've split it. This episode's biopics. We'll do documentaries in the future. And then at first I called it best biopics. But then I thought that misses out some of the wonderful texture of music biopics. So it's best and worst biopics. Now, Jago, I'm only telling you this morning. So when you gave me your choices, I'll fully understand if they are best biopics.
Yeah, but I can talk about ones I hate. I really can, as well. So we'll chuck it all around. It'll be fine.
Oh, there's some fucking stinkers coming up. Before we get into that, each week we have Riff of the Week, and we have one each. And this is Jago's Riff of the Week. Do you think there's anyone listening who wouldn't know who that is?
Probably not.
God, you can tell us who it is anyway.
It's Muse, and I have a bit of it's off the album Absolution. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Muse, I think, because I saw them on the tour of this, and it was one of the heaviest things. 2005, I think.
Oh, right. If you're about to tell me you saw them at Reading Festival, is that what you're about to say?
I am going to tell you that, yes. And
I was there. Placebo also played and had like some sort of technical malfunction, had to disappear.
God, yeah, they did, didn't they? Disappear for ages, yeah.
But yeah, I was shocked at how heavy Muse was. It might be the second time I'd seen them, but I was shocked at how heavy they'd become.
Yeah, and it's a good album, I think. Most of it. What I can't quite handle with Muse is the sort of slow songs. And his voice, after a while, starts to make me lose the will to live. But the heavy stuff and the riffs, what I quite like with Muse as well, and is how long some of those riffs are. They just seem to go on forever. It's like this classical piece that just goes on. And so when you say Riff of the Week, I was just sort of thinking, well, Muse, their riffs are interesting because there's quite a lot going on, and they are heavy in an interesting way. There's no metal to Muse, really. Because I remember they were at Reading, and Slayer had played. And I remember thinking,
oh my God, Slayer were put on.
They're quite
They put
early,
My
weren't they?
Chemical Romance on after Slayer. So basically, I don't know who, they didn't think that through. So basically, the crowd was full of Slayer fans. I remember like Reading Festival, like the main arena bit, there's sort of a hub in the middle, and it was all Slayer fans. And I've seen Slayer Alexandra Palace since, and if you put Slayer on, the fans couldn't give a shit there's an entire festival happening. They are there for Slayer, and they stand there literally going, you just hear people go, fucking Slayer, like all day long. And so Slayer came off, and I don't really remember much about them. I don't think they made a huge impression on me. My Chemical Romance came on, and I'm telling you this, you were there, but I'm telling you for the listeners, there's a scene in Henry V, a scene of Agincourt battlefield where the camera pans up and you see like the tens of thousands of arrows flying over from the British front line to the French. I can remember looking up and it was like that, but bottles of piss. And they're throwing bottles of piss at My Chemical Romance. They were getting pounded, absolutely pounded. And this is before they were a big band. God knows why they were on after Slayer. And I really, they earned my respect because the singer went, he sort of acknowledged it after about 2 songs and just went, give me your hate, give me your anger. And people did, clearly. He's like, we're not going away. You can be angry, but we're still like causing an emotion in you or something. I'm really butchering. I thought that's badass. And by the end of their set, at the time, I thought they'd won the crowd over because by the end of My Chemical Romance playing, the whole crowd was going nuts, like jumping around. But in reality, I think they probably just repulsed all the Slayer fans.
Yeah.
They probably all just left. Like, you got any more piss in you? No, I'm out of piss.
Yeah.
I did.
It's always a bit of a hatchet job with Reading, isn't it? I remember when they put, I think it was Placebo. You had Placebo and Green Day, and in between they had 50 Cent. And it was like, well, they knew exactly what they were doing, and it was just total carnage.
I wasn't there that year, but I had friends who went. And yeah, it was almost like they used to do like a comedy slot or stuff. They knew what they were doing. Maybe they were doing that to My Chemical Romance. But Daphne the year before, I was going to say Daphne and Celeste, and Daphne and Celeste stuck it out. Yeah. They did their whole set. They stuck it out, being absolutely.
50 Cent, he got all of his crew out to throw bottles back at the crowd. So they had loads of bottles lined up on a table. So it's like they almost knew it was going to happen. But then what clinched it, he stopped the song and he held up a metal chair and he just went, I think I'm done now. And then they finished because it was a bit like, well, if you could have metal chairs thrown at you, that's probably a time to end the set. But he played for most of the set, you know.
Oh, he did. Like, I wasn't there, but a friend came back and made it sound like he'd only lasted a couple of minutes and was sort of going, you know what, for all his gangsterness, Daphne and Celeste, they stuck it out. They are more gangster than 50 Cent.
No, he did quite a bit of the set, actually. He did a fair amount, really.
He must get to the point where he's like, screw this.
Muse kind of developed into something that I kind of disliked, really, over the last 20 years. I sort of listen to them now and then, and I just think I'm not interested in this. But that album, and some of the early stuff as well, Showbiz, and there's some bits off those 3 first albums that I think are pretty good. And it's a weird thing with Muse that I'll listen to them and I'll go, this is almost the best band in the world. This is almost the greatest thing I've ever heard. And then it's almost like if they had a lead singer that was like a Freddie Mercury or someone that added something so amazing, they would be the greatest band. But I think they're lacking that component because I think Matt Bellamy his voice just does that one thing, and I find it unbearable. As a backing singer, it'd be amazing, and the high notes are great for sort of the climax. But it's almost like if they had a real personality up front, I think they'd have been one of my favourite bands of all time. But there's something just stopping them from being that. Because it's great. It's great, really, and musically.
The timing of you choosing Muse is really, really good because my wife at the weekend went through, I was in the lounge reading or something and she was in the kitchen and she went through like a whole big Muse thing, I'm not going to say it because it'll happen, but hey, device, play a crap load of stuff by Muse. And I realised all the singing Every single song. Every single song has the same thing.
And at the end, it always goes. It always goes really high at the end of every song, and it's distorted and high, and it's sort of
everyone. And
grating, isn't it?
But there was one track, and I was trying to figure out which one it was. There was one track that played that I thought was absolutely astonishing. It was at the end of an album, and I think it's called Exopolitics, the song, but it sounds like they'd written 50 riffs for the album, done the 13 tracks, and thought, well, we've got a load of riffs left. Shove them all in one song.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of wig out stuff that Muse does. And the bass, that clip that you had, the bass playing on that is so good.
Yeah, they're amazing.
So interesting.
They're amazing.
Absolutely brilliant.
But I mean, I had a thing with coming off antidepressants, and this was the end of last year, and I was in the car, and I couldn't feel music for probably 6 months. I couldn't feel it because of the antidepressants. There's reasons why I was on them. I'm not going to go into all that crap, but it was like I could feel music again, and Muse was the first thing, and I was in tears, and it was like Butterflies and Hurricanes was playing, and I felt so impacted by it, and it was so intense. And I sort of love them for being able to do that to me, But after a while, it's like too much icing on a cake, It's just too much. For a while,
I saw them as being quite punk rock when they first came out, because there was a band in Ipswich called Rosalita. Do you remember them?
I think I remember the name.
They were kind of made up of kind of session musicians, but who are our age. So this is probably, I don't know, mid-20s to 30s. Astonishing musicians. And they had a fantastic frontman who, it wasn't a session musician because you can't really do that. And they formed this band, and they were fucking brilliant. They were so good. They did this art pop Talking Heads thing, but they were just such good musicians. And they won this thing called Road to V. So it was a Channel 4 thing, and it was like a Battle of the Bands type competition. The band that won got to open one of the stages at V Festival. Bizarrely, the next year, another band from Ipswich called Underline the Sky won it. But anyway, this band Rosalita, they got signed. And they're on a label called Taste Media. And it turns out Taste Media wasn't a straight up standard kind of big record label. It's kind of an indie 50-50 type thing. A bit like, and I'm going to get slain if I'm wrong, and I acknowledge that, but a bit like when people do hybrid publishing. Somebody says they've got a book coming out, and then they tell you that they're paying for the initial pressing.
Right, yeah.
That kind of thing. I think Muse were on that label as well. And I think that's quite cool. That's quite an awesome thing to do. I could be completely wrong. Just the last thing before we move on, because we've done what we do every time. We spent 20 minutes talking about the first riff of the week. When I learned who did Grace? This is appalling that I run a podcast. Jeff Buckley.
Yeah.
I can remember learning who Jeff Buckley was and watching a documentary, and Matt Bellamy saying, when we were forming Muse, I was trying to find my voice, trying to find my singing voice. And that's when I discovered Jeff Buckley.
Right,
and I was thinking,
makes sense.
Jeff Buckley's, totally and utterly. But and Tom York says the same.
Yeah.
But Jeff Buckley and Tom York have got such a wide range.
It's range.
They play with it. Matt Bellamy's got a brilliant voice, but he's just like, here we go. It's like slotting in
all
something.
The time. Yeah, it's intense all the time, isn't it? And and that's the reason I can't listen to Led Zeppelin, because all the time I'm just like, all right, stop now. That's enough. Let's do something else.
There's a couple of, probably 3 or 4 Led Zeppelin albums where they were way too far into the varifocal thing. Not varifocal, that's glasses. Varaspeed. So from Led Zeppelin 2 is when it started, and it peaked with House of the Holy, where it just got silly. So obviously everything recorded analog on chunky bits of tape. And when Robert Plant went to do his vocals, they'd slow the tape down. Not by a massive amount, but they'd slow the tape down so that when he sings, he can sing in quite a comfortable, powerful, natural way and have it perfectly in tune. Then they put the backing track back up to standard speed. And that's why on House of the Holy, some of his vocals are like Pinky and Perky. It's just daft.
You've got to try and do that live then, haven't you?
Live, he was a lot more of a screamer. And Led Zeppelin live, I've only ever found a couple of clips that I thought were astonishing. All the rest of it's absolute cack. And I'm not going to say much more because I might choose tour films or live films as a topic in future.
I think Ian Gillan was another one that's really able to do a full range. That style almost, but he was really able to. His voice was unbelievable, you know. So.
Robert Plant, not so much. Right, let's have my riff of the week, and it sounds like this, and it's a band I didn't know existed until, well, as we're recording, about 14 hours ago.
Nice.
Who's that?
I haven't got a clue.
I might stop asking you.
But my laptop speakers probably aren't doing it justice. I don't know. I don't know.
No. It's a band called Smote, and that song is "The Opinion of the Lamb" Part 1. So shit band name. Oh, I shouldn't say that. A band name I wouldn't choose. And I'm not afraid of slightly pretentious song names, but "The Opinion of the Lamb," I don't know. Part 1. But this is a band that's been booked.
I quite like that.
You like that?
Sort of silly, isn't it? It's knowingly silly, I think.
I suppose, yeah, very sort of self-aware, but
yeah.
So this band's been booked to play the Steamboat in Ipswich near the end of August 2024, depending on when you're listening to this. Well, it's always going to be 2024. It's not going to change if you're listening to this in another year. But I chose it because somebody said to me, this will be your sort of thing. And both me and Dr. Sam, my usual co-host, for both of us, that's a red flag. If somebody says, you'll like this, there's such an urge to go, really? Will I?
Yeah, you think you know me, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I'm your wife. Yeah, I know. But this one's Smoke. I started watching it, and it's one of these like in-studio live performances, which I like. I really like that's now. They sort of became really popular during COVID, and I like that they're a thing. But that's the only riff in the whole song, and it's about 16, 17 minutes long, and it starts off very small, and that's sort of near the end. But its ability to get heavier and heavier and heavier and bigger and bigger and bigger that's entirely my kind of thing. They were right. Yeah. Ricky Flagg, if you're listening, you were right. I fucking love that. Long wig out, see where it goes. Let's just have at it. Brilliant. Absolutely love it.
Sounds good.
So let's play your first track for our actual theme, and that is Best and Worst Biopics, and we're going to start with a stalker? That's not what I mean. A corker.
Ain't it fucking now?
Who be that?
Man Power. James Brown from the Payback album.
That's so slow.
The Payback album I've always been quite drawn to because it's the James Brown band. They're just such a well-oiled funk machine. You know, it's just like this. There's no room for any error or messing about. It's just so tight and just such precision. It's incredible. But yeah, the reason I chose that was because of the biopic, which was Get On Up, about James Brown. Chadwick Boseman. Is that his name?
When was it made?
2014.
Oh, okay. So not. Oh no, that was like 10 years ago. I was about to say, recent then.
But it's I think of that as fairly recent. But I think that out of all the biopics that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of them because they have a lot of them on. You know, there used to be a channel on Sky that just seemed to have biopics all the time, and it was some of them were quite low budget, and you just watch them and be like, "This is awful," but it's kind of interesting. I think Get On Up might be the best biopic I've ever seen. And the reason for that is the tone of it. So a lot of biopics will go, this individual is a bad human being. This individual is a good human being. This individual was surrounded by parasites. This is, victim or da 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 da. And there'll be a kind of an angle that they come from. I think with Get On Up, they went, here is everything we know about James Brown. Absolutely everything we know. You decide how you feel about it. And it doesn't hold back. It doesn't try and paint him, I don't think, in any particular light. It says he came from adverse sort of childhood experiences, used that energy to become who he was, did some awful things, but was a genius. And it's like it says all of that. And I just think the tone of it is spot on, really, which a lot of biopics don't do,
Well, they don't, and the worst ones are. I was just looking, so he was dead by the time this came out, and I'm quite shocked to see that he died in 2006. And I saw him supporting Red Hot Chili Peppers. I want to be clear, I did not choose to go and see Red Hot Chili Peppers. I saw him supporting Red Hot Chili Peppers, and that must have been. I mean, he couldn't have lasted much longer than that. It must have been quite soon after.
Christmas Day, didn't he, I think?
Oh shit! Really? So there's something interesting here, because I think you can sort of separate bands or biopics that come out where the main subject or subjects are dead, and biopics that come out when the subject is still alive. And one of your other choices, the guy who's at the centre is very much alive, and it's quite surprising. But we'll leave that for now. But yeah, James Brown, sort of problematic, difficult, interesting, wild. Just, I'm glad I saw him. I'm really, really pleased that's something I experienced. And he was not a young man, but he was 73 when he died, and it was still a fantastic show. The hype man came out. He did the whole, like breaking down and like having the blanket put over his shoulders and being led off, throwing them. It gave you everything you wanted from a James Brown performance, and I'm thoroughly grateful I experienced that.
Yeah, I think you have to give people their dues, don't you? You have to be able to go, he did all of those things. He was that. He was an incredible force of nature. He did some awful things, and that's the whole story. And you have to look at the whole story and decide whether you can deal with that or not. I think. But I think it's brilliant, and I think that the pace of it, the structure of that film is excellent. Yeah.
It's also much more interesting when films like this or biographies aren't, what's the word, a hagiography, which isn't a word I knew before I started this podcast with Dr. Sam, who's all clever and got a PhD and stuff. But do you know what I mean by hagiography?
Hagiography?
I don't know I think it's hagiography. But it's when you make a film or a biopic or write a biography or whatever, and you always place the subject in a position of being godlike.
Yeah.
So you don't look at the bad things; you only talk about the good things, and it's a bit of an overly congratulatory kind of thing. And those kind of biopics are just boring.
Yeah.
I think that they're just nothing to them.
There was a Jimi Hendrix one. I think it was Andre. Is it Andre 3000? How many thousands is he? 2,000.
I'm gonna have to pause you on that, and you'll find out why in a little while.
Right, but he did a Jimi Hendrix biopic, and it was an amazing Jimi Hendrix impression, right? Which is really important because you want to be able to go, like with Chadwick Boseman, you go, that's James Brown. I believe that's James Brown entirely throughout the entire film, and with him, he did Jimi Hendrix, and it was like, he's become Jimi Hendrix. This is incredible. And he did some awful things as well. But they didn't balance it out with the genius of his creations because they couldn't get copyright for his music.
No,
so it's utterly pointless because you're watching him be Jimi Hendrix and doing those things, but you don't get to hear his lyrics. You don't get to hear his arrangements. You don't get to hear the guitar parts that he came up with. he's doing covers and things throughout. So that felt like a real missed opportunity, actually. That I think, you know, and
well, his family just, or the estate just said no.
Yeah.
And I would like to know if they said no after reading the script or before, because what reason would that? The man's been dead for nearly 50 years.
The copyright is really strict on Hendrix, though, isn't it? On YouTube and stuff, you can't. Yeah, it's really difficult to find anything.
Whenever we publish an episode of Beat Motel on in the world of podcast, it doesn't appear to be much copyright control, but we've always stuck to 30 seconds, and there's precedent in the UK, legal precedent. Somebody, Universal or someone, tried to sue a podcast, and it's defined between whether you're using the music on a podcast to promote yourself, and that's the vehicle of the podcast, but you can do discussion. You can do commentary, which is what Beat Motel is, but we stick it at 30 seconds just to play on the safe side. And it's always interesting when the videos of each episode of Beat Motel hit YouTube, we can never tell what's going to get whooped. Yeah. There are some bands, a lot of bands get us banned in Russia. So the last one, Russia and Belarus, who was it? Was it Megadeth?
No, it wasn't. Pantera got banned in.
Pantera, that's it. The Beatles, the only thing that's one of only two things that's got us a worldwide ban. Another one of those was a country track, and I can't remember what it was. But yeah, Hendrix, I'm expecting to get whooped for this. But right, we ought to move on to you started off strong. You start with a good one, so I'm going to bring it down with this.
There's a car built just for me. To own a car will be a luxury. But right now I can't afford the gas. A brand new convertible is out of my class. But that can't stop me from thinking to myself, that car's fine looking, man. It's someone else. See.
do you wanna even try that? No, same artist wrote the song, but that's not who's singing it. It's someone who's not well known for singing. Someone who probably sells more posters than they ever did records, or T-shirts for that matter. That's Sid Vicious singing something else. Yeah, by Eddie Cochran.
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah, that's. I don't think that's a bad performance actually for Sid Vicious.
Got to hand it to Sid Vicious. If I thought that was Jerry Lee Lewis, that's quite good going, really. Yeah.
Well, I think he was a huge fan. So the film I'm talking about, because there's a few choices Yeah, Sid and Nancy, because there are a few choices here, but it's Sid and Nancy, which when I first saw it when I was about 16 or 17. It kind of terrified me for just how squalid and sort of horrible a lot of it is. And yeah, I stick with that now. And I don't think it's absolutely shit. I don't think it is like the worst biopic. But the reaction of members of the Sex Pistols to the film is quite interesting. I think John Lydon he just went, well, it was about me mate who died, so I'm not going to be excited, am I? John Lydon, who called the recent Sex Pistols thing made by Guy Ritchie a torrid middle-class fantasy, which I think is from John Lydon, such a damning thing to say.
But the thing about that is, with the new one, they couldn't have been more respectful towards John Lydon. It was so respectful.
I've not seen it.
It's not bad. It's actually not bad. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. But the John Lydon, they really pay tribute to John Lydon. They couldn't.
Oh, wow.
They couldn't more if they tried, you know. But in Sid and Nancy, the John Lydon is bloody awful. It is so bad.
Apparently, at the premiere, the surviving members of the Sex Pistols went, and Paul Cook, the drummer, had to be restrained from trying to climb over the from climbing over the cinema seats to get to the director. Wow. Because in Sid and Nancy, he's this like wheezy, he's like a character, a little weaselly man. He's like, it's like showing Roland Rat earlier. It's like they used Roland Rat to base whoever it was that played Paul Cook in Sid and Nancy. It's just.
But Gary Oldman, you have to hand it to Gary Oldman because he becomes Sid Vicious, and to have a career where you can be Sid Vicious through to Winston Churchill, and all the time, every character that Gary Oldman plays, I forget it's Gary Oldman. He becomes that character, even if he's a supporting role. He is absolutely amazing in a biopic. He's in playing other people or becoming a character that he's created. He's amazing. He's one of the best. Like Michael Sheen, it's that sort of level of being able to do that.
But yeah, not the best biopic. There's some tropes in it which have come from other films, which I don't know if I want to be damning and say that they're lazy filmmaking. But when Sid dies at the end and Limousine turns up with Nancy Spudgun in it, and they get in and have a kiss, they did that with another film. Michael Hutchence made a film about an Australian film about a fictional band, and they used that ending in that as well. Like same thing, main character ODs and gets in a limousine, which I find bizarre. But yeah, not the best. But if you've never seen Sid and Nancy, you might as well watch it. It's got Courtney Love in it, which I've kind of forgotten. Yeah, Courtney Love's in Sid and Nancy. Oh, which is years before. Obviously, when was it made? I think it's 80s. I don't think it was made that long after.
Yeah, it's always earlier than I expect, because I remember seeing it in the 90s and thinking it was an 80s film. But it's actually like 83 or something ridiculous, isn't it?
Oh, 86.
86. Okay, yeah.
Music by Wikipedia says music by Joe Strummer and the Pogues. Now, I don't think that's Joe Strummer and the Pogues like writing a soundtrack for it. It's probably songs of theirs were used.
Yeah.
Right. So let's move on to your next choice, which confused the shit out of me because I thought you'd chosen the band Funeral for a Friend. But let's have this.
Oh, it's cool.
That bass playing in that is so chonky. It's so It's like a bass playing from Achilles' Last Stand by Led Zeppelin I chose in the previous episode. But who was that?
Elton John. But and the reason I chose that particular tune is because I'd never been an Elton John fan. I never sort of grew up with Elton John or anything like that, and I'd heard the stuff on the radio and all that because he was obviously always on the radio. But I found Yellow Brick Road for $5 on vinyl in a charity shop like a couple of years ago, I think it was. And I took it home and put it on, and that's obviously the opening bit. And I was like, that is an amazing piece of music. That is an incredible kind of, rock opera opening to an album. And it's it's a pretty strong album, really.
It's the interesting thing because we're roughly the same age. So born in the mid 70s, and by the time I became aware of music to the extent that there were radios on in the house, or there was a radio on in the car or in shops, or I'm not going to list all the places that people use radios. By then, the Elton John that we heard was kind of what I think was the cheesier stuff, very unfairly, because that's entirely my subjective opinion. But the film that you chose this for, so the biopic was called Rocket Man, that genuinely changed my opinion of Elton John, and I mean of the music. And I think, again, it's a voice thing, but vocals, despite the fact I like black metal, vocals are really important to me. Black metal, they just sort of disappear. Someone go, ooh. Yeah. But the music's really fucking good.
Yeah. I mean,
really good.
Well, that is an issue I have with Elton John, is the arrangements, the music, all of that. The issue that I have is that he seems to want to make the lyrics incoherent for some reason. So much of it, and with some music, I think that's kind of that's okay. But with this, it's almost like it's about the song. It's about the words. It's about the music. So I find it a bit frustrating when it's got a little out of place.
Surprisingly good impression of Elton John
what
there.
are you doing? I don't know what you're saying. And it's almost like when it's that stripped down, I want to know what the lyrics are. I want to hear the song because it's just about the song. That's all it is, really. So I find that frustrating. Having said that, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, great album, amazing. But it's just, maybe you need to read the lyrics. I mean, there's certain ones, like, is it Jamaican Jerk on there, where you think, yeah, it's probably best that you have hidden the lyrics because it's pretty bad, But anyway, Rocket Man. The reason I chose Rocket Man, and I haven't watched it for a while, and I sort of looked up about it a bit yesterday, and it's directed by Dexter Fletcher, which
I know,
which I hadn't really. At the time, I wasn't watching it thinking this must be shit because it's directed by Dexter Fletcher. But anyway, what I like about it is that, unlike possibly any other biopic I've seen, it's a musical. And I think the difference is that when you have some, most biopics, they will play the songs on stage, they'll perform them, and then they'll come off, and it will be it's not necessarily part of the story. But in Rocket Man, he just starts singing, and the music will accompany it, and it moves the story along, and that's what I class as a musical. That's why I think a lot of these biopics, I wouldn't say they're musicals, because I think a musical is the song is part of the story. The song is part of the narrative structure of the story, not just there for the sake of it. And so I like that about it, but I also like the fact that I remember when I finished watching it, I thought they could show this in rehab, because what it does.
Oh, really?
It really shows his struggle, and he was involved in it. He gets it. He understands addiction. He understands the process of recovery from addiction. He gets it clearly. And that really comes across. And I don't think there are many films I can say that about, because usually it's just show them getting fucked up and then show them dying, and don't really go into the process of recovering from that, or there being that kind of journey. It's usually just for a reaction or for entertainment. But with this, at the end, he's in a meeting, just to ruin it for anyone that's watching it, that hasn't seen it. And all the time he's trying to cope with the demons of his childhood. And at the end, he finally stops. He finally stops running. He finally stops taking the drink and the drugs. And he's in the room, and himself as the child walks in and he hugs the child. And I think that symbolizes the process, a therapeutic process of recovery, better than I think I've seen in any sort of film like that. So that worked really well, I thought.
So we were saying earlier about kind of the difference between a biopic coming out when the person's alive and when they're not. And yeah, I don't sort of know much about recovery other than kind of long conversations with friends. But the fact that Elton John just so laid it out there, he's quite brutal.
Well, people have gone to him, haven't they? People have, like Robbie Williams, have gone to him. Because
and Eminem, they're
oh really?
They're not. When I say buddies, I can't remember what the AA thing is. Is it buddies where you have someone that you ring,
sponsor,
or you staying sponsor?
Yeah,
that's it.
Sponsor.
Yeah, he's Eminem's sponsor.
Wow. Well, I mean, I think he has an insight into recovery in relation to celebrity as well, which I think is kind of a different thing. Like when I was in rehab, you would have celebrities that came in. You would have people that were known, and there is a different element to it. There's something else that needs to be considered, because they are known. It's almost like a different sort of club almost, I think. And Elton John gets that. Elton John understands that. So I think they did it really well. And it's interesting, the idea of the person being alive, because the Queen one, I thought was appalling, right? And there's a number of reasons why I think that was appalling, because it was the two that were involved in it, Brian May and Roger Taylor, and you can tell it's them two that are involved and it's their side of the story. And there's a scene in it where Freddie Mercury's, in his bachelor pad with all the guys taking the drugs and doing all that, and the rest of the band walk in, and they sit there and they look at what's happening really disapprovingly, and then he goes, "Oh, why don't you stay? Why don't you stay here?" Just awful Freddie Mercury impression the guy does. Just shove some massive false teeth in and speak like that. And he's like, "Oh, why don't you stay around? Why don't you stay around, darling, and stay at the party? We're having a great party." And then they just go, "No, we're going to go back to our wives." And then they walk out. Absolute bullshit. It's the most homophobic load of shit I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, man.
I hate it.
It's right.
Because
this is one of my choices.
Because what they're doing is they're the film depicts homosexuality as the disease. The film doesn't depict just AIDS as being the disease. It depicts homosexuality as being an illness in society. That is the problem with that film, and I think it's disgusting. And the reason they did it is because they didn't want to upset their fans that are probably quite homophobic, you know, a lot of the time. A lot of people are in America, you know.
When I saw it at the cinema, and I was surprised at my emotional response to it. I saw it tail end of the run, so in a really small screen, and I was surprised at my emotional response, but with time, I know my emotional response to that film was the music.
Absolutely amazing. One of the greatest bands of all time, you know, without a shadow of a doubt.
And that's entirely what it was. And obviously, you know, Freddie Mercury dying was we're at GCSE age, I guess. So was it 1990? But, you know, that was a big thing. And then even though I grew up very sheltered and didn't sort of understand the world, the thing that came out a few years later about Freddie Mercury hiding the fact he had AIDS until just before he died, I can remember even as a teenager thinking, that doesn't sound very positive.
No.
That doesn't sound like it's actually going to help anything. But the film is so problematic. I enjoyed it for the music. I mean, that was it. And I was quite swept along by that. But yeah, the weeks and months afterwards, I started to sort of think it through and then started to have conversations with other people who just kind of went, what the fuck? And I can remember in the run up to it, this might not be true, but it took them quite a long time to get it made. And originally Sacha Baron Cohen was down for the role of Freddie Mercury. And there's been several different stories about why he dropped out since, but apparently one of them was in a script meeting with Brian May and the I Love My Car guy, the drummer. I can't remember his name. Roger Taylor. Yeah. They said, right, well, you know, this is the film. This is how it's going to pan out. And then obviously Freddie dies, and Sacha Baron Cohen's looking at the script and is going like, we're still in the first third of the film, third of the film. And they were like, yeah, because the remaining 2/3 of the film would be about how we became a better band and got bigger and bigger afterwards. And Sacha Baron Cohen was like, fuck off.
There's another story around that as well, isn't there? That he wanted to be Freddie Mercury, the party animal, and midgets with plates on the head snorting coke and just having a party and really celebrating the fact that he loved life. And I think the rest of the band thought, well, we kind of want to be family friendly. We're going to do a film about a guy who was a homosexual and loved to party and take drugs and have a good time and died of AIDS. But we're going to try and present it in a way that's family friendly.
Make it a PG, bullshit. Yeah. Right.
What they should have done. See, I think Sacha Baron Cohen would have been amazing, actually.
He's acting.
Because he was in a film, a TV series that was on Netflix called, I think it was just called Spy. And he was in that, and it was really dark, and his acting in it was incredible. He was amazing. And I just thought he could have done Freddie Mercury, and he looks so much like Freddie Mercury. And what they should have done is gone, right, no involvement from Queen whatsoever. Get Martin Scorsese to direct it, have Sacha Baron Cohen, and get some Queen biographers, get people that love Queen to write it, and it would have been the bollocks. They would have been amazing, I think. But as it was so compromised, it was just pathetic.
Yeah, and some of the focus, and I admit I got swept up in this, some of the focus was about how well they recreated the Live Aid scene, for example. And there are videos on YouTube side by side.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
How accurate that is. But
it's accurate. It's accurate in terms of movement. but I think it's utterly pointless. And also, the feeling that I get, Freddie Mercury looks big, right? I don't know how tall Freddie Mercury is. It doesn't matter. He looks big because of the way he holds himself, because of the way the way he stays, presence, amazing. Greatest showman of all time. And I just felt like the guy that was playing the role, it was like a child playing Freddie Mercury in a school talent show. It was just awful, I thought.
But one of the reasons I would have liked...
So that's my opinion of that film.
Well, Sacha Baron Cohen, I like the fact that we're sort of talking about film because, outside of this podcast, that is how you and I kind of connected and started sort of became friends. And Sacha Baron Cohen's acting was really interesting to me. He trained with the same person as my brother-in-law, a guy called Philippe Goulier, in Paris. And my brother-in-law moved over for 2 years, and this guy, he's the godfather of clown. And it's not clown as in a red-nosed funky wig. It's kind of dark, if I'm honest. It's kind of it's kind of brutal. You go, and there's quite a few famous actors have been there, but you go, and this guy more or less destroys you. Absolutely destroys you. But then helps you understand that to be a good actor, your ego has to be dead. Yeah, you have to completely abandon all that. And having seen my brother-in-law go through that, and he now uses it as a vehicle, this kind of thing, in a much nicer, more gentle way. He now uses it as a vehicle to help people who have been excluded from school and other things. And it's a conversation for another time. But that changed. I always liked Sacha Baron Cohen because I just thought I could never get my head around how sort of badass he appeared to be. And having now known the sort of the training thing he went through, it's not about just being ballsy. No. It's about reaching a point where the art becomes so much more important than the physical threat, like in Borat, where he's at the rodeo and just he's physically shaking in that part of the film because he's literally like, I think I might get shot.
Well, I mean, in Bruno, he does the wrestling, doesn't he? And he's surrounded by rednecks in that. And it's that is the most dangerous situation I think I've ever seen him in. It's absolutely unbelievable. But there's parts in I think it's called Spy, where he's not really doing anything. It's not really an over the top performance. He's just straight faced for a lot of it. And I think if you can do that, if you can be straight faced and not really and not really expressing any emotion in a sense, and you can still be a really powerful actor, that's incredible. I think
absolutely.
Certain comedic actors can do that. I think Eddie Murphy, weirdly, when Eddie Murphy does serious roles, I think he's extremely good. I really do. When he does an emotive part, he's really powerful.
A few people I've not ever managed to buy for being a good comedian or being a good comic actor, but trying to be serious. Somebody I've never managed to buy from that is Eddie Izzard. Did you see the adaptation of the Triffids?
No.
Then I say recent again. Probably it was 2010 or something.
Yeah.
But he's trying to play a genuine unpleasant person. I just couldn't buy it. Just couldn't see it at all.
Adam Sandler's an amazing actor. That's really strange.
Yeah,
really
again,
weird. Incredible.
I can't remember what it was I saw. Completely changed my opinion. I was like,
a lot of comedy actors can be incredible. I think actually, I think it does.
Robin Williams was another one. Where when he turned dark, it was fucking terrifying. Right, I'm going to play my next choice, but we're probably not going to talk about it long.
Okay.
There's a biopic.
It's going to get deleted in most countries.
Oh yeah, but if there was a biopic of my life, if you're watching this on YouTube and the sound's been edited out, I'll just tell you that was Jimi Hendrix with Axis Bold as Love. If there was a biography of my musical life, and they needed a scene at which suddenly my whole body became fizzing and fueled and inspired, and I'd stand up slowly from a chair and turn to a friend and go, "What is this?" The first time I heard the end of Axis Bold and Love, it was that moment. It was like, I don't think I'm going to be the same now.
Incredible,
I think I've changed.
I don't know if you, I don't know how much to go into in terms of consuming certain things and listening to that album.
Oh, you can talk about drugs. But the only rule we have is we don't say the C word.
Well, through exploring certain chemicals and things like that over the years, that album, I've listened to a lot of music and tried to sort of find the thing that is most consistent with that. And I'd say that album is it. Actually, I think if Six Was Nine, particularly, I think with in a certain state, that album is remarkable. And I've gone to another place, I've gone to another realm listening to that album, definitely. In ways that I can't really explain in words. Do you know what I mean?
There's details, even like mechanical musical details in Hendrix that I'm never going to stop discovering. So I'm a parent, and when your children are young, they'll watch the same TV program or same film like 50 times, and it crazes you as your parent. But I read an article in the New Yorker by a psychologist who said, look, if you ever seen a film twice and the second time you notice something new, with children, the way they gather information is so different and so accelerated that it takes them 40 or 50 times to get all the nuances. It's entertaining every single time. And as a man who's in middle-aged man that I am, I'm still getting that with Hendrix. I'm still like every single time I'll hear something new. That little riff, he's not just hitting the notes, he's sliding into it. Every single note he plays, he's sliding into it. It's
ridiculous.
Remarkable.
But I mean, also from a perspective of different instruments as well, like playing drums and getting more into drums. I've appreciated Mitch Mitchell more and been amazed by what he does, So I think that comes through as well,
But we have talked about how shit the film was, so we'll move on to your next choice.
Yeah, cool.
Dive on guitar. Robbie Krieger. Wow.
It might be my favourite intro to any song that has ever existed I've ever heard.
It's got everything. It's got the rawness of... We ought to say who that is. Who is it?
The Doors, when the music's over. But the beginning, when it starts as well, but you obviously couldn't have all of that in that gap, in that short space. But the beginning, when it's the din, 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 and it's just these little fills, John Dent, it's just incredible, amazing.
Like dive bombing. I've never heard the dive bombing on Robbie Krieger's guitar.
Yeah, amazing.
It's like absolutely 20 years before Jagmoimsteam. What's his name?
Yeah, whatever it's called. Yeah, just ridiculous. What a band.
Stevie Vai. There you go, Stevie Vai.
So the film, the Doors.
Blew my mind at 15. We rented it from the Village video shop, and we had to get a friend's dad to get it because it was an 18, I think, back when films that had the word poo in them or anything stronger than that were 18.
Yeah.
And we sat there, me and my band actually at the time, sat there absolutely transfixed. And you said earlier about Andre 3000 becoming Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Val Kilmer just
is
Jim Morrison.
Because me and my mates watched it so many times, and then Val Kilmer would be in something else, and I remember going to see Batman Forever, and I had the opposite thing where you think where you're trying to disconnect the actor from the person they're pretending to be. I kind of had that with Batman when he was Bruce Wayne. I was going, well, that's Jim Morrison. I couldn't disconnect. It was really weird. So whenever I seen Val Kilmer in anything, I'd be like, "That's Jim Morrison. What's he doing? What's he doing?" It's really odd.
Yeah. Entirely agree. I mean, Top Gun at the time was like, wow.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is like
doing in a plane.
falling out with Jim Morrison while Jim Morrison's flying a fucking fighter jet.
I mean, there's a lot of liberties that Oliver Stone has taken, and it's based on John Densmore's book. And even he admits,
is it really? I didn't know
think
that.
No one here gets out alive. I think it's a lot of it's kind of based on that, and he was involved. And he's in some of the scenes, isn't he? He's in it briefly, I think, at the end actually. And
Billy Idol in it as well. Billy Idol
was in it. Yeah.
He was supposed to have a really big role, but he'd had his motorbike accident, so he was paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh wow!
That's why in the film you only see him sitting down.
Yeah. Okay. But he takes a lot of liberties with the truth, But and we know this because we have the footage. We have the footage of the Ed Sullivan Show, and it didn't look like that. We have footage of certain things that happened, interviews and things. We know it wasn't quite like that. But I really respect Oliver Stone's tenacity, his vision. He's gone, I'm going to make the Doors film I want to make. I'm going to celebrate the Doors in the way that I want to celebrate it and celebrate that era. And I'm just going to do it. And Ray Manzarek has said he thinks it's appalling. He hates it. And it doesn't it doesn't show Jim Morrison. He said he depicted Jim Morrison as an alcoholic, and he hates the film. He hates the fact that happened.
Kind of was,
but I love it. Because it makes him out to be a lout, doesn't it? And he said, well, he wasn't like that. He was actually quite gentle. He wasn't that sort of person. But
he had two sides. He had the very gentle side, and then they had Jimbo, and Jimbo was the
he was
drum.
Either sort of he was either a yob, or he was sort of floating around going, being a poet. And it's sort of a cartoon version, but I almost think it's like a mythical version of the Doors story. It's like a fairy tale version. And I quite respect Oliver Stone's consistency in that. He doesn't waver from that. Like we were saying with the Queen film, it's constantly pulling its punches all the time. It's trying not to offend people. It's trying to it's tripping over itself all the time. Oliver Stone just went, I'm going to make this film the way I want to make it. I don't give a shit what anybody says. This is the way I view it. This is the celebration. And I love it, actually. I love the celebration of the Doors, and I think it opened up a whole new audience for them, really. It did with me, really, and my mates.
Absolutely did with me. To be honest, I don't know if we even knew that the Doors was a band when we got the film. We were just had this insatiable appetite for any entertainment about bands and about music. I still have.
Yeah.
It's not really gone away. We've been talking for an hour and 2 minutes here about a relatively small collection of films, but I that Christmas after it came out, because the Doors had this resurgence, Ray Manzarek and I can't remember if it was Krieger or Densmore, they were film students, weren't they, with Jim Morrison. So I've always been under the assumption that when they start to make a lot of money as the Doors, they would have done what you and I would probably quite naturally do, go out and buy a fuckload of camera equipment. So they released this VHS video, which I've got in the loft, of they made loads of new videos of loads of their songs, just from all this kind of, I don't want to say home video footage, because clearly they can afford really good cameras. But some of that, I watched that video so many times, it's probably unwatchable now, because they had really, really interesting things on it, which were never featured massively on the albums. Like, there's a version of Adagio for strings they do.
Oh, of course, because they put it with his poetry at the end, don't they?
It's with his poetry, but the film they made is basically the Doors having a nice day out on a yacht. Like they filmed it. But I would really interested to see or to know if Ray Manzarek made films, because it was his thing, and whether if the Doors hadn't have taken off, whether he would have become a filmmaker. Because I guess once you're on the path of being a massive rock star, any film you then make is going to be film made by that massive rock star rather than film made by that filmmaker.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting thing.
There's a good documentary, actually. I think, is it People Are Strange? And it's Johnny Depp narrates it. And the whole thing is just footage of the Doors throughout their
really,
throughout their existence, and that's good. That's quite a.
What's it called?
I think it's People Are Strange, and it's maybe about 10 years, maybe about 15 years old or something. That's worth watching, yeah, because that just shows it, and it shows sorts of some scenes that are in the film, and so you get a sense of that. That's really good.
Yeah,
I like it. I think it's a beautiful looking film. I really do. From the opening scene, and in the desert to his death at the end, I think it's symbolic, isn't it? I doubt he looked like that in the bath. Let's face it, he wouldn't have looked.
It was
like
a heroin
that.
overdose.
He would have looked like a bag of shit. I've seen someone that's had
heroin.
He would have
not looked peaceful, smiling.
And so he's laying there and just staring into the light, but it's beautifully done. It's a beautiful scene.
It's a cracking film, but I'm going to play my next choice, and then we're probably not going to discuss it much. Did you know who that was?
Rory Gallagher. Did he have a biopic? I don't know.
There's something about the crunchiness of the guitar, the sort of the slight palm music, which is, I've been obsessed with that noise for a long time. This is from an album that came out in 1974 by a little known band called Queen. Oh. And that's the album Sheer Heart Attack, and that track is Brighton Rock.
Right.
And I chose it, and my point for this when we were then going to go and discuss Bohemian Rhapsody is that side of Queen I really liked. A lot of this just made up shit from the film I couldn't relate to at all. And then I was going to say how basically we've had this discussion, so let's just like anything else you want to say about Bohemian Rhapsody. Let's move on. Right, your final choice.
Trying to do some bears dancing then.
Who were that?
Happy Mondays. I mean, I wanted to choose. I just wanted to choose something from that era, and that's quite a nostalgic one actually. When I heard that, I was like, oh man, I remember that on the radio at the time. So that's a real
I bought it on 7-inch.
I really I used to love that, and 24 Hour Party People is the film. And I think actually there was someone on the TikTok that mentioned it, so I think that's what kind of gave me the idea. Doodar 8, shout out to Doodar 8 because he said about it. But I think it's excellent. I think there's an excellent biopic, and what it does, which is different to the majority of biopics, is it doesn't go, here's Sean Ryder or Ian Curtis, and we'll follow them around. They'll get fucked up, they'll collapse and they'll die, and that's the film. It shows you from Tony Wilson's perspective, and you are him. You're seeing it from here, and he's trying to, and from his perspective, you're herding cats, just trying to get this stuff organised all the time. And I think that works really well, actually, as a way of presenting it, because you're not just following around people getting messed up. You're actually trying. It's frustrating because he's trying to hold it together, and I think that's brilliant. And I think there's an interesting thing with Steve Coogan, because as he usually does, to be honest, he kind of becomes Alan Partridge throughout the film. And but then I thought to myself, but Alan Partridge is probably based on Tony Wilson.
With Tony Wilson, if you see footage of it,
it's like a chicken egg thing, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like that's the reason that he exists, is because of presenters like that. Therefore, we can't really say he's being Alan Partridge, because Alan Partridge is born from that. So it's paradoxical, isn't it? But I think it's great. I think it's a beautiful film, actually. Brilliant film.
Never saw it. I saw this for the first time. I'd be surprised if it was even 2 months ago. And the Manchester scene was what got me hooked on music. It absolutely was. And I don't really know why I never watched it. I think I didn't want to be disappointed. I think it's like the first time when I saw the first Lord of the Rings film, I just sat there feeling really anxious and just thinking to myself, please don't be shit. Please don't be shit. Yeah. And I watched it. And for one thing, the film was nothing like I expected it to be. It's really interestingly put together. And we were talking earlier about, we keep saying about whether a biopic comes out when one of the subjects is still alive or when they're dead. Tony Wilson was very much alive and involved in the film.
Yeah, he was in it.
And in it. Yeah.
But obviously, he, like Elton John, was very candid and was able to show his flaws. I mean, there's some interesting bits in it where you see his private life a little bit, and it's a little bit tragic. And there's a bit where he looks at the camera and says, "But and he says, well, this isn't about me. This is about Hacienda. This is about And so it moves on. But I really like that. There's sort of some little serious sort of tender bits where you think, oh man, this is kind of difficult.
I like the breaking the fourth wall. I'm going to play my next one. I need to call something to my daughter. So I'm going to play this. We heard all of that, didn't you?
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all.
So that was Johnny Cash with Walk the Line. And have you seen the film Walk the Line? With
I saw it at the cinema, yeah.
Oh, really? I chose this because I was expecting nothing. I was expecting absolutely nothing. To be honest, I sat down and watched it on, I think it might have hired a DVD, but sat down and expected a sack of shit. And actually kind of came out of it going, do you know what? That was actually quite interesting.
Yeah.
That was actually quite good for some interesting reasons. Like, it's the first time I'd ever seen Elvis portrayed as anything other than like some sort of fucking god. And there's certain people in this world whose opinion I will almost take on face value and believe, because I think they've probably done their research. And Chuck D calling Elvis a racist, I'm going to believe Chuck D from Public Enemy. I'm
right.
I'm going to say he'd probably know far better than I ever could. But I enjoyed the whole portrayal of like the birth of rock and roll kind of thing. I just thought it was really entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, I've one thing that I did think was that they maybe pulled their punches a bit, because it kind of showed him as a bit of a gentle giant, and I just got the feeling that, like with James Brown, they show him when he is a complete shithead. They show that, and with Walk the Line, they didn't really do that. There's a bit where his wife and kids leave him, and the scene leading up to that, it's almost like he accidentally falls on her or something. And is a bit like a buffoon. And I just sort of think that's probably not what Johnny Cash did. And looking at it as the era that it was, he may have been a bit more aggressive than that. And I mean, it doesn't have to be depicted as that, obviously, but there was something about it where I felt a little bit like they were showing him as a bit of a gentle giant. And he had some drug problems. He had some issues. And they seem to skirt around it a little bit. So I thought it was quite a kind biopic. That's one thing I'll say about that.
That's a good way of putting it, actually. It wasn't a hagiography. See, word of the day. But it did skip over a few things. But I sort of, that's never what my mindset is looking for on the first watch of something like this. I say, like, it's always the music is always what connects, apart from the 24-hour party people, which is just a riot. It's wild. It's one of the wildest films I've seen. I'm like, and what I find incredible is it was made 10 years after these things had happened. It's not like it was made 40 or 50 years after it happened, like with Johnny Cash. All of those people were around.
Yeah.
And Shaun Ryder's not portrayed particularly well in that. No. He's still about. He's doing, actually, he does a he does a walk with Bill Bailey. I think it's Channel 4 or BBC. Walks with Bill Bailey, and it's I've talked about it on the podcast before. It's Shaun Ryder and Bill Bailey going out for a stroll. That's actually, he's brutally honest about addiction. Really is, like, just so straightforward about it. This has been a very entertaining show, but we are 15 minutes over, and my daughter is outside trying to do some sort of maintenance on her bike, so I need to go and do some parenting.
Okay.
So thanks ever so much for being involved again. This has been great. Listeners, just get on and subscribe, will you? There's plenty of doing it now, so you won't be alone. Your friends won't think you're weird because you subscribe to the Beat Motel podcast. They'll look up to you and think you're wonderful. Anything you want to add before we say goodbye, Mr. Jago?
I don't think so. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.